Hello and welcome to Hardman Talks. I'm Larissa Adams and I'm joined by Keith Hiscock, our CEO at Hardman & Co. Keith, welcome. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. So we are going to be continuing our talk on the effects of the October 2024 budget by discussing your thoughts on the outlook for 2025. So I think let's start off by talking about what you think will happen in the UK economy this year.
Well, I think if I look at the measures that have already been announced, let's talk about what they're likely to do. So I think, first of all, we're likely to see higher inflation than would otherwise have been forecast. Why am I saying that? I think that's because, in particular, the cost of employing people has gone up in the UK after the government um, put up the rate of employers' national insurance contributions and cut the level at which it starts. So I think companies are going to respond to that by cutting back on recruitment, by making people redundant, but also by putting prices up. So I think we're going to see higher inflation would otherwise have been the case. The second thing is I think we're also going to see higher interest rates than otherwise would have been the case. I'm not saying they're not going to be cut this year, but I think that the pace of that reduction is going to have been slowed by the fact that the markets are worried about how much money this government might need to borrow and will have to pay more. And that itself then obviously increases the deficit. And that inevitably travels across to the rest of the economy. I think we're going to see lower employment, which I've already said why that would be the case. The economy has been bouncing along in the last few quarters and months around about no growth. Some months it's a tiny growth, some months it's a tiny decline. But broadly, it's that. I think there's an extremely good chance that we will get a recession during 2025. Now, let's be clear what that means. So, what economists mean, it's a slightly arbitrary definition. What economists mean by recession is two consecutive quarters of negative GDP. We've avoided that since we came out of COVID, only just. We have had one quarter, but we haven't had two consecutive quarters. I think we're likely to see that this year. So the background for the economy is pretty tough. A key date, I think, for investors to look out for is the 26th of March this year. On that date, we are due to get a report from the Office for Budget Responsibility. So this is a government-backed organisation that helps the Treasury and the economy understand what's going on in the economy by making some forecasts. And I think it's quite likely to forecast that this government has used up all the room that there is in its fiscal plan, or all the wiggle room, and that we are going to have to see either taxes increase or spending be cut. I think the likelihood is we'll get a bit of a combination of both. That's going to be pretty difficult politically, but we'll come on to that in a minute. And so what you're seeing at the moment, as we're recording this interview, is the UK government is looking around for ways that it can demonstrate that it's still committed to the growth that it said was so important when it came into office. It said, what growth in the economy does is it enables you to raise more taxes without sort of hurting people. It enables you to spend more money on public services, get better public services, etc. And so it wants to be able to demonstrate that it is committed to growth. I think it's never going to admit it, and I suspect it realises it was a bit ham-fisted in the budget in October, and that is going to achieve the opposite of what it wants. And so it's looking around for ways to grow the economy. So, as we're recording this, it's announcing it's going to agree to a third runway at Heathrow. It's going to spend more money on the Oxford-Cambridge route and developments around that, etc., etc. Now, that's all great in terms of we're committed to growth. Of course, the reality is that none of that's going to happen in the short term. None of that's going to have any effect on GDP in 2025. probably not in 2026 either. But it's sort of looking around for a narrative that can demonstrate that it is committed to growth. But as I say, I think the worry has got to be that we are going to have more tax increases in the spring, in following on from that OBR report, and that we'll have cuts in spending as well. So it's not a fantastic outlook. I mean, one would like to be positive about the economy, but the reality is it's not a fantastic outlook at the moment.
Yeah, I can agree there. It definitely sounds like a very tough backdrop for this year. Um, that's great, Keith, though. I think could we talk about the politics side of it for what's your out what would be your view for politics this year in
Yeah,
2025?
I think we want to talk about this because it will infect investors. So I've already said I think the likelihood is we're going the Chancellor is going to have to do something in the spring, probably raising taxes, probably cutting expenditure. Now, raising taxes obviously is going to militate against growth, which is one of their aims. It's the cuts in public expenditure. Now, so far they've talked about getting rid of waste in government and all that sort of stuff. Well, we hear that from every government. I mean, it's meaningless, really. But if they are going to start to cut stuff like it's going to have to be the welfare payments budget, it's going to maybe be the NHS, because those are by far and away the biggest parts of the economy, of public spending.
Mm.
And that's going to be pretty difficult for many people in the Labour Party because they've committed themselves to not doing that. That was their criticism of the Tory government back in 2015. That will be very difficult for them to brook. So it's quite extraordinary that just over 6 months from the election of this new government, serious thought's been given out there in the markets and in politics to the idea that the Chancellor won't survive. If the Chancellor has to raise taxes and cut public expenditure again in this spring, her job is really on the line, I think. And as a result of that, almost certainly the Prime Minister's job is on the line. It doesn't look as though he's enjoying the job, to be honest, and he might feel glad to be out of it. But chancellors and prime ministers tend to be linked together, and I think if you're a Labour MP who was elected in this massive landslide in terms of the number of seats back in July, you may think to yourself, well, we've got 4.5 years still to go. But the way things are going have been very tough. It's much easier to be in opposition in many ways than it is in government, because you have to make decisions in government. And you hear lots of Labour MPs are saying to themselves, well, I didn't get elected for this. I didn't get elected for such a dreadful background. If public expenditure is cut, I wasn't elected for that. I wasn't elected to get rid of the winter fuel allowance. I wasn't elected to deny the pension claims of the WASPy women. It's very difficult for them. If they think they're facing a clear defeat, they might well take the view any change is worth it because we might have a chance. So I think extraordinarily, after just 6 months, there is serious thought being given to we might need a new chancellor. She might not be around by the end of this year. I don't think she will be around by the end of this year, and that's got to put a question mark under Keir as well. So those things are destabilising. They'll be destabilising not just for politics and for the government, but they would be destabilising for the markets as well.
All right, Keith, thank you so much. I think it's really great to get your views on all of this. So to our viewers, again, if you would like to read Keith's full notes on the budget, you can head over to our website. We've got the link in the description below. Otherwise, please do like and comment on our video wherever you're watching. Every piece of engagement does help. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Thanks.